Okay, so the first precept we're going to have is Deuteronomy 28, verse 37. Deuteronomy 28, verse 37. Now, if any of you are familiar with Israelites, you've probably heard Deuteronomy 28 a million times. Basically, Deuteronomy 28 talks about, is basically spelling out the particulars of the contract with the Most High. That if you do keep the commandments and if you don't keep the commandments. Now, one of my pet peeves is that everyone likes to focus on the curses. Not everyone focuses on the blessings also. So in your own time, I challenge you, go to Deuteronomy 28, read the entire chapter, because verses 1 through 14 talks about the blessings. But then all of the rest of the chapter talks about the curses. So we always hear about the negative stuff and the curses, but we never hear about the blessings. Shout out to the Shana in the chat. Nice to meet you too. Shalom, shalom. So I'm just going to read verse 37, but you could read the rest on your own time. Okay, so Deuteronomy 28, verse 37. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. Okay? Now, this should be very obvious. You know, this is not going to be easy to break this down in one little live stream, but it should be very obvious who the real Israelites of the world are. No other group of people do you have these bywords or these proverbs across the world, okay? They use the N-word for us here in the Americas and other nations. West Africans refer to us as akata. In Arabic, we're referred to as Jaffers, okay? Pickaninnies, all these different words you could come up with, okay? On the top of that, no other group of people across the planet of the world, here to defend Hillary, okay? No other group of people across the world use these ethnic slurs for themselves. No one else does it. We're the only ones. What's up, my ninja? How you doing, my ninja? What's going on, my no other group of people. So it should be very clear who the people of the Bible are, who the real children of Yahweh are, who the Israelites are, when you look at the totality of all of the curses. Okay? And it's absolutely ridiculous. Even these so-called intellectual Hebrews go out here talking about, oh, we're reclaiming the N-word. We're going to take a negative and we're going to turn it to a positive. No, it's stupid. It's foolishness. It's ignorance. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know why anyone does this. I don't know why anyone allows this to happen. Even when I'm conversing with Israelites on social media, and they'll say things like, well, you have black folks, or you have Israelites, or you have Negroes, or Hebrews, and then you have ninjas. It's like, no, the Bible is telling you that you're going to be a mockery, you're going to be a proverb and a byword amongst all the nations and all the places that we've been scattered. It's going to be an astonishment and an amazement. And even Hebrews are participating in this. It's bad enough when we're getting this from the other nations, but when we do it to ourselves, that's even more ridiculous. So I know years ago there was this campaign, we need to bury the N-word. We absolutely need to bury the N-word and do away with it, okay? We shouldn't use it. No other group of people should use it. If these rappers and in pop culture and other stuff, in entertainment, if it wasn't used then and popularized, especially with the proliferation of hip-hop, then no other group of people, no other nation, no other ethnicity would be using it and codifying it for themselves. We need to bury it and stop it from here and from on out. You know, and let people call us what we should be called. We should be called Hebrews. We should be called Israelites. We should be called the chosen people, the children of Yahweh, the seed of Abraham, the seed of Isaac and Jacob. That's what we should be known as, not these other buffoonery bywords and proverbs that they have. Okay, so let me move on to Psalms 44. Psalms 44. And for the people who will be watching this on my YouTube channel, I'm going to put the precepts in the description box below and the pinned comment, so you can always have that as a reference. Praise the Lord for technology. You can always pause the video and pull it up So the next precept or the next witness is Psalms 44. Oh, and I am using the KJV for anything I'll do. I'll use KJV. For the time being, that's the best English version of the Bible to use for right now. For English, if you're an English speaker, if English is not your language, then I'm not sure what to recommend you. But for the time being, the KJV is the best thing that I can find for English speakers. And if I find something that's just as good or better, then I'll let you know. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and read the entire chapter on this one. Okay, so Psalms 44. We have heard with our ears, O God, our fathers have told us, what work thou didst in their days, in the times of old, how thou didst drive out the heathen with thy hand, and plantest them, how thou didst afflict the people and cast them out. For they got not the land in possession by their own sword, neither did their own arm save them. But thy right hand, and thy arm, and the light of thy countenance, because thou hadst a favor unto them. Thou art my king, O God, command deliverances for Jacob. Though thee will push down our enemies, through thy name will we tread them under that rise up against us. For I will not trust in my bow, neither shall my sword save me. But thou hast saved us from our enemies, and hast put them to shame that hated us. In God we boast all the day long, and praise the name forever. Selah. But thou hast cast off, now here's the important part here, but thou hast cast off and put us to shame, and goest not forth with our enemies. Thou makest us to turn from the enemy, and they which hate us spoil for themselves. Thou hast given us like sheep appointed for meat, and hast scattered us amongst the heathen. Thou sellest thy people for naught, and dost not increase thy wealth by their price. So meaning that basically we got sold off amongst the rest of the nations, because I'm sure David is probably talking about some of the things he went through his time, but also in Psalms, or whoever some of these authors were of these Psalms, there's some prophecy or foreshadowing for the future as well. So here in verse 11, talking about how scattered amongst the heathen, sellest thy people for naught, and does not increase wealth by their price. So that's meaning you're just basically sold like you're nothing, like you're a piece of property. That's what chattel slavery was in the United States, in the Americas, in Europe, across the world, and wealth, and does not increase thy wealth by their price. So meaning that it doesn't matter how much you were sold for, or how much our ancestors were sold for, none of that matters. You were still considered to be chattel, worth nothing, basically considered like animals and livestock. No matter what price you were sold for, what they bartered for you in exchange, you were still worthless. Let's continue with verse 13. Thou makest us a reproach to our neighbors, a scorn and a derision to them that are around about us, and makest us a byword among the heathen, a shaking of the head among the people. And that's a popular one you have right now, the SMH, shaking my head. Here you go again. Makest us a byword amongst the heathen. Okay? All these names that they use first. Okay? And like I say, once again, the reason why we're in this situation is because our ancestors transgressed. They didn't keep the covenant. Even worse, when Jesus came onto the scenes in the flesh as the anointed one, the people rejected him and they kicked against him. They said, we don't want him as our king. Caesar is our king. And that's what we're dealing with now. We're still being controlled by these Caesars. We're still being controlled and ruled by Rome. You know, all of these European nations that control the world right now are daughters of Rome. I don't care if it's the United States, British Commonwealth, the European Union. It doesn't matter. All of these nations are daughters of Rome. Okay, so those Hebrews back in the day really gave it to us bad, because we're really feeling the punishment of Caesar right now, suffering this affliction. Okay, the next witness, or the next precept, is going to be 1 Kings chapter 9 verses 3 through 7. 1 Kings chapter 9 verse 3 through 7. So let's get to it. Okay, 1 Kings chapter 9 verses 3 through 7. And just to set this up, just to give you context, this is in the time where Solomon, who is the son of David, this is when he would become king, and he was wanting to build the temple for the Lord. David wasn't able to build the temple because the Lord said, because you were a king of war, or a man of war, I'm not going to allow the temple to be built in your time. But he was given the instructions for the temple, and he was able to make provisions in order for the building temple, in order for the building project to take place after his time, after his reign. But his son Solomon would be the king who would actually go on to build the first big temple of stone unto the Lord. So Solomon's getting ready to set up the temple, and he's speaking with the Lord, and this is what we're going to read through right here. 1 Kings chapter 9 verse 3 through 7. And the Lord said unto him, I have heard thy prayer and thy supplication that thou hast made before me. I have hallowed this house which thou hast built, to put my name there forever, and mine eyes and my heart shall be there perpetually. And if thou wilt walk before me, as David thy father walked, in integrity of heart and in uprightness, to do according to all that I have commanded thee, and will keep my statutes and my judgments, then I will establish the throne of thy kingdom upon Israel for forever, as promised to David thy father, saying, there shall not fail thee a man upon the throne of Israel. Now here's the kicker. But if ye shall at all turn from following me, ye or your children, and will not keep my commandments and my statutes which I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel out of the land which I have given them, and this house which I have hallowed for my name will I cast out of my sight, and Israel shall be a proverb and a byword among all people. So once again, our ancestors dealt treacherously continuously with the Most High, coming out of Egypt, in the wilderness, when we had judges and prophets amongst us. Originally, Israel was not supposed to have any earthly king. Jesus, God, the Godhead, the Elohim, was supposed to be our only king, as what was laid out, as what was prophesied. But then the people decided to make Saul of the tribe of Benjamin their first king. We see what happened with that. Then the Most High chose a man after his own heart with David. Even David had shortcomings, because we're all human, we're all sinners, we're all going to fall short of the glory of God. Okay? But the Lord was still with him and kept his covenant. Okay? And he always will keep his covenant. He just has to do certain things to restore his people. And then with his son Solomon, the same thing. He's going to continue to pass his covenant on down through these descendants of his people. And he told Solomon, if you keep my charge, if you keep my commandments, if you keep my statutes, if you keep Torah, if you keep the law, I will always bless you. But if you turn from me, if you violate that contract, you're going to face the punishment. It goes all the way back to Deuteronomy 28, that was laid out with Moses in the wilderness in Sinai with the first congregation. The first congregation was in the wilderness. The first congregation was in Sinai. The first congregation came out in the Exodus, the mixed multitude that came out of Egypt, out of bondage. And we did not keep his charge, we did not keep his commandments, and that's the punishment. And therefore, we are a byword and a proverb among all people, and unfortunately, even amongst ourselves. That's why we have all these names used against us. That's why we have all these pejoratives used against us. And I know some people say, well, other groups have slurs and things like that. Yeah, that's true, but like there's nothing out there that's to this day that's like the N-word or anything else like it. And as I stated earlier, all of these other different ethnic groups, whether it's been in the United States or other places, even though these slurs and these pejoratives have been out there, no other group of people do you find, not Japanese, not Italians, not Irish, not the people who call themselves, Jewish, not any of these people, none of these other people, not Hispanics, not anything. They don't use these racial slurs amongst themselves like you do with the so-called black people. We're the only ones going around, what's up, my ninja, and they will still have other words for us in their languages or their community, but then they'll still use these insults against us, and then we use it also. Or like in Spanish, how they use mayete, okay? So no matter where you go, they have a little special little nickname just for Israel, okay? And it all goes down to the curses, okay? And now let's go to Jeremiah 24, verse 9. I might end up reading the whole chapter of Jeremiah. Let's see. Okay, now I'm just going to read that one verse. Okay, now to set this up for context, Jeremiah was a prophet during the latter days of the split between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom of Israel. And he was prophesying to the southern kingdom of Judah that if you don't do what you're supposed to do, and if you don't quit worshiping these other gods and breaking the commandments, that you're going to get punished or you're going to get sent into captivity. And just to set this up, anytime when a prophet showed up into town or into Jerusalem, 9 times out of 10, it was bad news. Everybody tells about, the prophets and everything. If the people would have done the right thing, they probably wouldn't have needed prophets for too much. There were some occasions of, good news. 9 times out of 10, it was bad. And it was bad news because the people were doing wickedly. Okay? So, Jeremiah 24, verse 9. And I will deliver them to be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth for their hurt, to be a reproach and a proverb, a taunt and a curse in all places whither I shall drive them. Okay, once again, who's been the only people in the world who's that happened to? We haven't been scattered in all 4 corners of the earth because not necessarily because of willful immigration. We didn't willfully come to these different places, to these different lands. We're not immigrants. We didn't choose to be here. Okay? It didn't say, oh, you're going to relocate, you're going to move, you're going to go to another country for a better life. No, you're going to go into these other countries to be hurt, to be a reproach, a proverb, a taunt, and a curse. Okay, why would you immigrate to someplace willingly to be a taunt and a curse, to be taunted and cursed by other people? Why would you willingly immigrate to another nation to be called special little nicknames and little slurs by other groups of people? If we wanted abuse, we could have had abuse amongst ourselves. Why would we have abuse amongst the other nations? So this just proves, once again, that, this whole N-word business, there's nothing positive from it. You can't resurrect it. You can't reclaim it. You can't own it. You can't make it your own. It is accursed amongst you. And as long as you continue to allow this pejorative to be accepted in the community by ourselves and by others, you're basically afflicting yourselves, and it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Okay? And then the last witness I will give, or the last precept, is going to be another prophet, Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 6 through 8. Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 6 through 8. And personally, Ezekiel is one of my favorite prophets. All the different prophets or prophesying that he had, you know, and it touches on so many different elements. Ezekiel 14, verses 6 through 8. Okay. Therefore say unto the house of Israel, Thus saith the Lord God, Repent, and turn yourself from your idols, and turn away your faces from all abominations. For every one of the house of Israel, or of the stranger that sojourneth in Israel, so that's not just physical Israelites, that's also other people, other nations that are not physical Israelites, but could be spiritual Israelites, or basically converts, if you will, which separateth himself from me, and setteth up and setteth up his idols in his heart, and putteth the stumbling block of his iniquity before his face, and committeth to a prophet to inquire of him concerning me, I the Lord will answer him by myself. And I will set my face against that man, and I will make him a sign and a proverb, and I will cut him off from the midst of my people, and ye shall know that I am the Lord. So once again, when you look at the prophets, how they prophesied, some prophets had details more than others, but all the prophets are basically saying the same thing. That's why when Jesus came, Jesus said, I come not to do away with the law or the prophets, but to fulfill. Jesus did not come here to start a new religion. Jesus had to come because the original transgression was with Adam, or Adam, with man, for eating from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And since then, humanity has been in a continual downward spiral. So then, sort of like his second chosen of Israel, because it first started with Adam, then you go from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob becomes Israel, then we get the Israelites. The Israelites, even the strangers amongst us, who also came under the covenant, they didn't keep the commandments either. Okay? So all of this transgression, and it was being prophesied. If you read, it's prophesied even back in Genesis. You know, this king that would come and take away the iniquity, and he shall reign for forever, and he shall set up his kingdom for forever. Jesus was prophesied since the very beginning. Why? Because he was necessary from the very beginning. Because since man did not hearken to the word of God, and they wanted to eat of something else, we're not having to deal with this affliction. Adam and Eve had curses, the Israelites had curses, and we're still, all of humanity is dealing with it to this day. And even if you're someone of another nation, even if you're not a physical Israelite, okay, the Bible tells us that all of the nations basically have been set according to Israel. Okay, everything that's happening with every other nation out here on the face of the earth is set based upon the Israelites when we were in the land, and now that we're in these captivities. Okay, so we now have to walk around with this burden and this shame that our ancestors didn't keep the commandments, and the rest of the world is screwed up because of it. Just like the rest of the world is screwed up because Adam particularly, but also Eve, broke the first commandment. Don't eat of that tree. Okay? So that's just what the situation is. Now, I probably should have done this before. I'm going to go pull up some definitions real quick, because you see proverb and byword is being used a lot. So that way you understand what these terms really mean. Okay, so proverb. Proverb, a short, filthy saying in general use, stating a general truth, or, I'm sorry, I can't read that, or piece of advice. So a proverb could be different things, or like idioms, basically sayings or slogans that we have. They could be positive, they could be negative. Oh, I'm sorry, it says a short, pithy saying, not filthy. A short, pithy saying, okay? Or another way to put it is like a generalization, okay? So when we have these words and these slurs that are out here, that are used for all people, but also used for Israel, they're basically like generalizations or stereotypes. But when it's a negative stereotype or a misgeneralization, then you don't really want that generalization to define who you are as a person or to define who you are as a people. So in general, when you talk about proverbs for people or groups, usually they're not very good things. And then let's pull up a byword. Okay, byword. A person or thing cited as a notorious and outstanding example or embodiment of something. Also could be a word or expression summarizing a thing's characteristics or a person's principles. Okay, so these things could be positive or they could be negative. Okay, so when you come to these different types of slurs that you have, these slurs, obviously, they overgeneralize. There's, as I like to say, in stereotype, there's some type of truth, but they overgeneralize and they really like to focus on the negatives and not the full truth. Okay, so that's these proverbs and these bywords that are used against us. Okay, so at the end of the day, the judgments and the curses are all of the Lord. It's the punishment that we face because our ancestors have transgressed. There's not any time to play. The Israelites of the world and all of the people of the world, if you say that you love God, if you say that you love Jesus, if you say that you are a follower of Jesus, it is time for the people of the world to come together and to acknowledge the truth. You need to keep his commandments, keep his statutes, keep his judgments, keep his ordinances, keep the commandments. The law has not been done away with. The only thing that's been suspended has been the Levitical laws, the Levitical priesthood, animal sacrifice, the sacrificial laws, and the cardinal ordinances for transgression. This wasn't the lesson for that. This is actually kind of like my first lesson, okay, as I've been doing all my study and preparation. But those are the things that have been done away with or suspended. Those are the things that Jesus put on the crux. But I could show you, even when you read the quote unquote so-called New Testament Christians, I could show you, even only using the so-called New Testament, because there's really only one testament because there's only really one covenant. The only thing that was lifted were those particular things: Levitical laws, Levitical priesthood, sacrificial laws, animal sacrifice, and the cardinal ordinances of transgression. Okay, that's it. The rest of the commandments you still need to keep. You still need to keep the 10 Commandments, because you're not going to have brothers marrying their sisters, or adultery and fornication, or covetous people, or murderers and liars, and people who bear false witness, or people worshiping idols. And you still need to keep the Sabbath. You still need to keep the Shabbat. That's the 7th day of the week, not the first day of the week. Okay, 1 to 7 is very easy to count. The 7th day, not the first day. You still need to keep those things. Okay, grace is the fact that you weren't killed, that you weren't eliminated, or the fact that you're not going to get tossed into the lake, even if you did commit transgressions at some point in time along the way. That's what grace and mercy is. Because see, back in the day, you could have just been stoned to death, or you could have been set on fire. You could have gotten that judgment right then, right there. It's not like, say, like in the United States, where someone may commit a murder and then they'll be sentenced to death, and they could be on death row for 50 years. Okay, the judgments back in the day in the land, the judgments happen quick. They happen swift. Something found out, if people reported against you, if there was at least 2 to 3 solid witnesses, particularly when it came to death, if there were 2 to 3 solid witnesses or more truthful witnesses, and you were found guilty, the judgment was death, and you were going to be stoned, or you're going to maybe be set on fire. So what mercy gives you is that you don't get killed, you don't get taken out. Even after the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, you had instances where people had committed certain transgressions, and they were being witnessed against, and then they just passed out. If you read in the book of Acts, okay, and people, they were witnessed against, they basically got spoken out against for what they did, and they immediately passed out and collapsed dead where they stood right there and died. Okay, so in that situation, God didn't send man to do the judgment of stoning you or burning you by fire. He enacted the judgment himself, and he just took your life, and the breath of life went out of you, and then that was it, and you were gone, and then you were going to be buried. And then when we get to the ultimate judgment day, then you're going to get that ultimate judgment. But then he gave you that initial judgment even at that time for those individuals. So that's what grace and mercy is, and forgiveness is, that you still get an opportunity to make up for what you've done. So just like Jesus has given us that grace and that mercy and that forgiveness, we should try to do that for other people as well. Don't always hold them against it for it. Give them an opportunity to make up for what they've done. Give them an opportunity to atone, so they can maybe move forward as a better person. Now, I was going to do another particular YouTube video about Gina Rodriguez, because yes, I've noticed, and especially if you're an African American so-called or black person, if you're an Israelite, you've noticed recently that Gina Rodriguez has thrown a lot of shade, or had a lot of deflection, or microaggression, or passive aggressive types of comments and shots against the quote-unquote blacks whenever it's been something that's been promoting us in a positive light, whether it's men or women or as a group. And she's really taking it upon herself to insert her own beliefs or her own agenda when it's been a venue that's been for us and for our betterment, and that's what we call in our community, that's what we call throwing shade, or she's just basically trying to hate on the down low. So I don't know what her deal is, I don't know what her issue is, but this has been that I've noticed, at least this has been maybe the third or the fourth instance of her doing something, so I don't know what her situation is, but my advice to a Gina Rodriguez would be you just need to catch yourself, you just need to check yourself, and whatever issue it is that you have, she's Puerto Rican, so with Puerto Ricans, and no, I'm not one of those Israelites that subscribes to that whole 12 tribes chart, because you'll see the people on social media on the corners and the sidewalks, and they have all their different signs and everything, and they believe this doctrine of the 12 tribes, and allegedly the Puerto Ricans are supposed to be Ephraim, and that's completely bogus. So, but even though she is a Puerto Rican as far as her ethnicity or nationality, there is a possibility that she might have some Israelite in her bloodline. Now, in the Bible, the bloodline goes by the father. It's patrilineal, it's paternal. So whatever the father is, that's what the children are, that's what the offspring are. So if you track her paternal lineage, I don't know what you're gonna find. For example, in Mexico, there's this saying that they have of the black grandmother in the closet, okay? And if you go maybe 2 or 3 generations back, you'll see this darker person in the family, but because of intermixing within the community, within the society, you have people who get lighter and lighter, just like you can have mixing in the United States or other places, and that's why when you look at, say, Arabs or so-called Middle Eastern people, or the quote-unquote Hispanics and the Latinos, they can be various different shades. They can go from dark to light. They could go from pale skin to dark skin. And it just depends upon the lineage and the genealogy and the mixture. Even, with the Spanish creating, the Spanish culture over here in the Americas, even back in the land of Spain, Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula, or the land of Al-Andalus, as it was referred to by the Arabs or the Arabians. I'm going to use some pronunciations here that are more of the, I guess, modern Hebrew, even though there's no pure language on the earth right now. Even the Hebrew that they use today is not really a pure Hebrew. So it may sound a little funny, but that's just what I use in these instances. So you'll notice a lot of different people like that, where there's just been a lot of mixtures, a lot of surplanters, a lot of migrations, a lot of captivities, a lot of bondage, a lot of oppression. You're going to get these mixed societies. So you get different blends, you get a different variety. I don't know what her background is. I don't know what her lineage is. She potentially could be a physical Israelite. She just would be, in our community in the United States, she would be what we would call yellow bone, or light skin. But she could still potentially be a physical Israelite. So I don't know what it is. So whatever her deal is, if she's a physical Israelite or if not, she needs to get over it. And my advice to her would be, deal with your issues. Whether if you want to be more on one side, or if you want to be more on the other side, or if you feel like that you're caught in the middle or caught in between two worlds, you got to deal with your issues, because we know we have people within our community that have issues too, and we have people who have issues in these other communities, these other societies, these other ethnicities and nations. You need to deal with that, and you need to come into truth, okay? Especially if you're a physical Israelite, but even if you're not a physical Israelite, okay? And then that way you could be, if you want to be with us, that way you could be with us in the right way, not in the negative, and we could be on the same page, and we could get this word out and spread this word out. So that's just what I wanted to get out today. I just wanted to bring biblical context to this whole the N-word thing, Gina Rodriguez and otherwise. If, as I've talked to Israelites on social media, if you're a so-called black person or African descent, whatever, if you are an Israelite, you should not be using these words as so-called terms of endearment towards our people, towards each other. You are being a curse and an affliction to yourself, to our people. And if you're someone who's not an Israelite, I don't care if you listen to rap music, I don't care if you like hip-hop, I don't care what the situation is, you shouldn't use these terms either, okay? Because you're just helping in the curse, you're helping in the affliction, and you're basically fulfilling prophecy that's been laid out there because our ancestors transgressed, and more importantly, the whole world, everyone needs to come into truth. This is the way it was supposed to be. The Israelites were intended to be a nation of a royal priesthood. We were supposed to be the ones to go out to teach the people the true gospel, the true word, not this Romish or Catholic Christianity. And I don't care if you call yourself a Protestant or a Catholic or non-denominational. Rome is the one that put in place Romish Christianity or Catholic Christianity or white Christianity or European Christianity, whatever you want to call it, with a white Jesus. Jesus didn't look like that. Jesus didn't look like some surfer on the west coast of California, okay? Jesus looked like a brother. That's what he looked like, okay? So you should be with us in receiving this teaching. And even if you're not a physical Israelite, just like Timothy, whose father was a Gentile, but his mother was an Israelite female. So Timothy was mixed. Timothy could have looked like a Lenny Kravitz or Blake Griffin or Colin Kaepernick anybody that's mixed, especially with a white father and a Israelite mother. Lenny Kravitz has a white father, Israelite mother. Jussie Smollett, even though he's not the best example to use for obvious reasons, Jussie Smollett and his siblings, they have a Gentile father and I believe an African mother. Okay, there's a number of them out there like that. Tracy Silverstein or Tracy Ellis Ross. Okay, she has a white Jewish father, and her mother is Diana Ross. Her mother is an Israelite, and her father is probably Ashkenaz, a Gomerite, a Gentile. Okay, so these are some examples of what, say, like a Timothy could have looked like. So he might have been mixed, or he might have been light-skinned with a Gentile father and an Israelite mother. Timothy still had to be taught and trained by Paul because he was a Gentile. Why? Because the bloodline goes by way of the father, not by the mother. So if you're a Gentile, whether if you're mixed or if you're not, you need to receive teaching and training and instruction from a physical Israelite who's in truth, who has proper doctrine, sound doctrine. I like to stress that enough, because a lot of these quote-unquote camps that you see on the street corners that have these different acronyms, they wear these very interesting looking costumes like it's Comic-Con and stuff like that. A lot of them have bad doctrine. But Israelites like myself, where we have social media platforms and we have like actual churches, and we broadcast services and lessons on the internet, and we might do some grassroots outreach on the out in the public, but it's not like how you see these people use, or they use foul language. And now granted, we're going to say some things that people don't like to hear. We're going to say things that people will consider to be controversial, or quote-unquote pro-black and Afrocentric. We're going to say things that people get offended by, especially when it comes to the real heritage. But we're going to simply give you the truth from the Bible, and that's it. And we don't have a doctrine that says only the Israelites can be saved, salvation is only for the Israelites, everybody else is damned. No. Now, salvation is of the Israelites, meaning we were supposed to be the lead, we were supposed to be the head. Our ancestors botched that mission, okay? But even still, I've not seen really too many Gentiles out there who have proper teaching, who were trained by other Gentiles. There's some Gentiles out there who have some pretty good doctrine. The ones who, they have the testimony and the faith of Jesus, and they also keep the commandments. What's going on to Billy? Sorry you kind of came in at the tail end, because I'm about to wrap it up, but what's going on, and what's going on to everybody who's out there listening? But that's what, there's a structure to this. There's an order, okay? You have to follow that structure. You have to follow that order, because we were the people who were given the prophets and the oracles and the seers. And basically, when you hear those terms, all that is another name for a prophet. Or like a watchman. Watchman is just another name for a prophet. A seer is just another name for a prophet. An oracle is just another name for a prophet. Now, when these terms were used amongst different nations, they became mystified, and they woven in their own mysterious beliefs, but essentially that's just a prophet. But you can tell a good prophet from a bad prophet or a false prophet by the doctrine that they have. Okay, so that's pretty much the lesson I have. Hopefully, Lord willing, there's a new moon lesson I wanted to do, hopefully within the next few days. But I'm still a student myself, so I don't want to get myself ahead of my skis with teaching certain lessons that are a little bit more complex. But this was a very simple lesson. There was only about 4, maybe 5 precepts. Very simple lesson, And if you read even deeper into these chapters and verses that I had, it will lay out and show you who the people are based upon the curses and the affliction that's taking place across the world. I don't think I linked my YouTube page, and like I say, I'm not going to really do any lessons immediately. It's going to be a while. But the name I have here is the PhiladelphiYAHH. Okay, it's PhiladelphiYAHH, and then just do redeem. Just type that REDEEM. Just type that into the search on YouTube. Same logo with the colors of the purple, the crimson, the scarlet, and the blue. The same colors of the tabernacle. You'll see that pop up. And if you want to look at, there's not a lot of like deep biblical lessons. It's more lessons or topics that pertain to the community and ADOS and kind of more like political type of stuff, but with a bit of a biblical background to it. But I'm not going into scripture like I did in this one in really too much of those lessons, because I was more recent into truth and now I've done more studying. I've almost finished through the Bible, so my goal is to just put out some lessons that I feel like other churches haven't put out. Put out some lessons correcting a lot of the false doctrine that we see out there amongst Sunday Christianity, but also even amongst Israelites. There's a lot of false doctrine. So what's messed up about Israelites is that we've basically done the same thing as Sunday Christianity. We've basically ended up creating all these different denominations, and everybody has their own little doctrine. Somebody has this kind of 12 tribes chart, somebody has that kind of 12 tribes chart, and all these false doctrines that are out there, nobody can substantiate it with the Bible. So we're gonna have to, unfortunately, we have like double tasks now. We've got to correct the false doctrine of Sunday Christianity, and we also have to correct the doctrine even of Israelites who have bad teaching. So if you missed anything in this lesson, this is being broadcast on YouTube right now. Let me go ahead and stop the YouTube feed.